Hey, good Friday morning, everybody. This is First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Pamage doing the vlog a little bit early today because for once, I don't expect any significant changes to the 11 a.m. advisory. Of course, I will post them on my page as soon as they come out. But let's get right to what's going on with Hurricane Irma. There it is right now. This is a quick loop, obviously, from sunrise until right now. And you can see the eye is becoming a little bit less defined. Now, we're splitting hairs here. Don't fall for this is getting weaker. It's degraded. Those are kind of terms I don't like because it's still a monster category 4 hurricane, and it's still bringing winds of 140 to 150 miles an hour. So you can see there's the eye wall. There's our strongest winds right there. Hurricane force winds extend roughly out like this. And so don't get caught up also in the wide view of the clouds. The clouds aren't where the strongest winds are. The clouds are just something we see on satellite. But one thing you notice, and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, one of the tricks of looking at hurricanes on satellite imagery that kind of gives you a hint on where they're starting to move or they're going to churn is once you start to see the outflow go in that direction, that means this thing's about to take a turn because this starts to hint when the clouds start spreading off in that direction that the storm is about to make that churn. So we're going to see that happen probably tomorrow as the storm does one of these and then comes back in this direction. I'll get more into the actual track here in a second, but I did want to show you some of the steering currents going on with it, at least initially with the visible satellite image. Let's show you the updated track, and I'm going to put it on here real quickly. You can see the track from the Hurricane Center, and here's what I'm talking about as far as the wind field. This is a good example of how big the wind field actually is. If I put it from the tropical storm force winds to the edge of the tropical storm force winds, that's 280 miles tropical storm force winds. The actual hurricane force winds extend out about 50 miles to the south, but they extend widthwise about 100 miles across. If I put it from the middle out, the hurricane force winds actually extend out about 70 miles to the northeast. So when you see these, how big the storm is on the satellite, that's not necessarily where the strongest winds are, but I do expect this wind field will spread out a little bit as it pushes to the west. So the track is pretty consistent, moving to the west and then making that churn in the Florida Straits and absolutely clobbering South Florida. There are hurricane warnings, storm surge warnings up. If you're in this area, get inland and get north as quickly as you can because this is going to be a huge hit to South Florida. Further north for the Carolinas, this is going to be a reduced threat because of the amount of time that this is going to spend over land, and it's going to start curving back to the west. Now, huge storm surge is still likely in areas in Georgia and even the low country of South Carolina. Not as much as yesterday's track, but remember, the circulation is wide, and as this comes up, the water's already being built up down here, okay? The winds are going like this, so this surge is going to work its way up the coast, and then because the coast is shaped like this, you're still going to see high water. In fact, I think we'll see storm surge 3, 4, 5, 6 feet in some cases where it's susceptible to storm surge. But then you see the curve back to the west, and so the natural question is, why is this track going to stay? Is it going to shift again? I'll tell you why I don't think we're going to see a major shift east or west, probably in the short term, because there's actually fairly consistency in the models and the ensembles. Now, these are the ensembles, which don't look at the black line, just look at the colors. This is all the 51 runs or members of the European model. Look how clustered together they are. If you've been watching me in the past, we've seen huge spreads. These are really clustered in this area. That's really good agreement. And that's one model. This is the GFS. Now, it goes out farther, obviously. You can see it going to the northeast. But look at in the same short-term period, it almost looks identical to the European model. So we don't see a lot of shift in the tracks. In fact, let me turn off those. I'll put the models on if I can get them to pop on here for Irma. You can see how consistent even the spaghetti plots are. Now remember, not all plots are the same. We disregard that. Some of these are bogus. But the cluster is right in here. And you're probably saying, well, why is the storm going to do that? Well, let's look at the water vapor loop. High pressure's been pushing it east or west, excuse me. The high pressure is off to the east, but it's been pushing it to the west for a while. Look at these two little short waves, we call them. Big long wave trough here, two short waves coming down in the base of this trough. Watch these little short waves. You see them there? One there, one there. They move down, and because they're spinning counterclockwise, as they get down here and the storm moves north, it pulls it back. It kind of wraps it in. And you can see that on the actual model data. So here's a look at this. I'll move this over so you can see it. watch this little shortwave come down. You see it down there over Arkansas right there? There's our storm down there. Now watch what happens as it gets down here. It moves down to the Florida Panhandle and it starts tugging on it. It actually merges with it a little bit. The next piece of it, jumped ahead too quickly. The next piece on the backside, the second piece, pulls it west as well. And you can see it actually get pulled back to the west. It gets kind of sucked into it. Kind of like a vortex, kind of like a drain. Pulls it back in that direction. And then you see it become like a big upper low. And the whole time it's over land. This thing is also going to supply what we call wind shear. So it'll help tear it apart. So it's going to be over land. It's going to wrap with this thing. And it is going to become a pretty big windstorm. I don't want to discount the threat for wind. I expect we'll still see some pretty good power outages. In fact, this is the model they have for the forecast power outages. I think it's underestimating a little bit the winds in this area. Because in the mountains of North Carolina, we're going to have big time winds. I bet we'll have tons of power outages. And even in the Charlotte area, I'd say we're probably going to have some power outages. But overall, there's no denying that the wind threats have diminished, at least in our area. But I still think there'll be a swath of high wind damage in here. And I'm talking 40-50% power outage, excuse me, and likely tree damage. In Charlotte, I think the threat has gone down to medium. And I think that'll be the case as it gets closer. The rain threats as well, we're still kind of on that medium to low end range. I don't expect a huge flood event by any stretch of the imagination, but with rain falling at the rate it will be, we could see some localized flash flooding. It just won't be the duration that we saw with other storms, and after a day or two, the water will be a non-issue. In fact, looking at the rainfall forecast, you can see the heaviest rain, maybe 15 to 12 inches on the east coast of Florida, and then you see some amounts, maybe 7 or 8 up in here, but in Charlotte, probably talking in the 3 to 5 inch range, and again falling over about a 2-day period, day and a half, should not be a big deal. Here's the thing to remember though, this is not going to miss us. It's just that the threats are going down. I think a lot of folks think, oh, it's shifting west, all clear, let's go back to normal. Not so much. We're still going to get 30 to 40 mile per hour winds, and we're likely going to see rain of 2 to 4 inches. You put those together, you know how it is around here. Anyone who's lived in the Carolinas, that's enough to bring down trees. It won't take much. But we really got to start thinking about the poor folks down in Florida here, because this is going to be an Andrew type event for South Florida unless this storm weakens dramatically. And there are maybe some signs it could weaken a little bit with some shear interaction with Cuba, but I don't see it dropping below low-end Cat 4, high-end Cat 3, which is going to be a devastating blow to parts of South Florida. So we'll wait for the 11 o'clock update. I don't expect a huge change in it, like I mentioned. The general track seems to be really kind of fine-tuning itself now, and there's pretty good confidence. We've had great confidence down here, but the confidence up here is growing more and more because these things are over the continental United States. Over the United States, we've got a great network of weather stations, upper air, radar, surface observations. So these things are getting sampled really well by cross-country flights. All these things are sampling these little systems, these little short waves coming down. So I feel like that part of the forecast is doing quite well. But the one word of caution I would give you is Florida is a very narrow state. Subtle shifts east or west still could put this thing over water and make for bigger impacts to the north. So you can't really let your guard down completely. In fact, the track right now is only about 70 miles from the east coast of Florida and only about 75 miles from the west coast. So it's right smack dab in the middle. And any little shift back to the east puts it over warm water that could cause some issues. So that's the latest on Irma. I will post another update later today as things change, and stay tuned to my Facebook and Twitter feed. I will put that new track out at 11 o'clock as soon as it is issued. Have a great Friday, everybody, and please be prepared and think about all our friends down in Florida. We're thinking about you guys.